The anomaly appeared without warning. One moment, the Sol system was as it had always been, a collection of planets and moons orbiting a blazing sun, humanity stretching its dominion across the void. The next, a wound had opened in space near Neptune, swallowing light itself. Admiral Elias Varian stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring at the live sensor feed with a sinking feeling in his gut. The black sphere wasn't just an absence of light. It was an absence of everything. Long-range probes sent toward it simply ceased to exist. Not even debris was left behind. Just nothingness. "Sir," Lieutenant Anya Patel called from the sensor station, her voice tight. "We're picking up fluctuations in local gravity. Space-time is warping around the anomaly." Varian nodded grimly. That was expected. What wasn't expected was the unnatural sensation creeping through the ship, a pressure in the skull, a whisper on the edge of hearing. The Indomitable was a warship, hardened against electromagnetic interference, neural attacks, and even psionic warfare. Yet whatever this was, it was bypassing every defense, as if they weren't even there. "Confirm all fleet ships maintain safe distance," Varian ordered. "No one approaches until we—" A sudden pulse rippled through the void. Every screen on the bridge flickered, distorting into static before stabilizing again. The hum of the ship's engines dipped for a moment, as though reality itself had glitched. And then the voice came. It didn't transmit through the ship's comms or the emergency channels. It didn't arrive as a text message or a coded transmission. It simply appeared inside their heads. "We have returned. Kneel or be unmade." The words weren't spoken. They were imprinted, burned into the minds of every crew member in an instant. A deep, abyssal presence wrapped around their thoughts, pressing down with something older than time itself. Several officers gasped. Patel let out a strangled sob before slamming a hand over her mouth. Even Varian, who had seen war beyond counting, felt his hands tremble for the first time in years. "Report," he snapped, shaking off the pressure. "No source detected," Patel stammered. "It wasn't a transmission. It just appeared in our heads." "Long-range probes." "Gone," another officer cut in. "All telemetry lost. It's like they never existed." Varian clenched his fists. This wasn't just an anomaly. This was something intelligent, something watching. And then Neptune's largest moon, Triton, vanished. One moment it was there, a massive frozen world, its icy surface glinting in the distant light of Sol. The next, it was nothing. No explosion, no debris, just a perfect, empty void where a moon had once been. Silence choked the bridge. Patel whispered what everyone was thinking. "What is this?" A second pulse rippled outward from the anomaly, and for the first time in centuries, humanity felt something it had long forgotten. Dread. The silence on the bridge of the Indomitable was absolute. Admiral Varian stared at the void where Triton had been, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. A celestial body, a moon, an entire world, gone without a trace. No energy readings, no debris, no shockwave. Just nothing. Across the fleet, officers and scientists scrambled for answers, but none came. The anomaly pulsed again, a rhythmic beat like the slow, methodical breath of something alive. Something waiting. Varian's jaw tightened. "We're leaving." No one questioned him. The Indomitable and her escort ships reversed course, pulling away at maximum burn. As they did, another whisper slithered into their minds. "Run, children of the stolen flame. It will not save you." The air on the bridge felt suffocating, as if the ship itself was resisting their escape. Lights flickered, and for a brief moment, Varian swore he saw something standing in the reflection of the main viewport, tall, indistinct, watching. Then it was gone. As soon as they reached safe distance, High Command was alerted. Within hours, an emergency summit convened on Luna Base, deep beneath the lunar surface. Every major leader, scientist, and military strategist was in attendance. Varian stood before them, replaying the footage of Triton's erasure. The room was silent as the moon simply ceased to exist. No one spoke for several long seconds. Finally, Fleet Marshal Dorna leaned forward, her voice hard. "What in the name of Saul are we looking at?" "We don't know," Varian admitted, "but it's intelligent, and it knows us." The scientists launched into debates, throwing theories against the wall. Some kind of quantum anomaly, an unknown alien superweapon, a localized failure of reality itself. But it was Dr. Elias Kedar, a historian of all things, who finally broke the cycle. "This has happened before." The room turned to him. Kedar was an old man, his face lined with the weight of knowledge few dared to dig into. He held up a datapad, displaying a file pulled from the deepest classified archives. Records so ancient they predated even humanity's first interstellar expansion. The Blackened Sun. The word sent a ripple through the room. A few officers visibly tensed, as if the name alone stirred something forgotten. The term appears in banned historical records, forbidden texts, myths from long-extinct civilizations. The idea of a star that isn't a star, a darkness that burns instead of shines. Kedar's voice was grave. It wasn't a legend. It was real. Varian stepped forward. "Explain." Kedar took a slow breath, as if forcing himself to say the words aloud. "Thousands of years ago, before the first Terran Empire, before recorded history as we know it, humanity fought something. Something so catastrophic that our ancestors erased all records of the war. Not just from databases, but from memory itself. They left behind only fragments, whispers in forbidden texts, varied warnings in the oldest ruins. They called it the Blackened Sun." Dorna's expression hardened. "And now it's come back." A tense silence fell. Then a transmission interrupted them, its source unknown. "The light you stole is fading. We have returned." The transmission echoed through the command chamber, but it didn't come from the speakers. It bypassed all security, all firewalls, all encryption. It was simply there. Every screen flickered, showing distorted static. Then, for a brief moment, an image appeared, a starless void, and within it, black, jagged shapes, moving with a terrible, unnatural grace. A fleet. Confirmed transmission source. Fleet Marshal Dorna barked. "Unknown," a technician stammered. "It wasn't received through any of our networks. It was just imprinted. Directly into the system." Varian's gut twisted. This was wrong. This wasn't technology as humanity understood it. This was something else. "Expand the long-range sensor net," he ordered. The room fell into tense silence as deep space scanners extended their reach beyond the anomaly, sweeping across the void. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then the alarm screamed. The screens updated, real-time sensor feeds revealing massive distortions in deep space, beyond the orbit of Pluto. Shadows detached from the darkness, taking form. Ships, but not ships. Their hulls weren't built, they were grown. Twisted and writhing, as if space itself rejected them. Black ships, an entire fleet. They weren't just watching, Varian said grimly. They were waiting. The fleet moved with a silent, nightmarish precision, and even without direct scans, it was clear they were coming for Saul. Dorna turned to Kedar. "What do your records say about their capabilities?" The old historian's face was pale. "They don't. Every trace of the war was erased. I only know that humanity won, but not how." Varian clenched his fists. That wasn't good enough. The room erupted into chaos. Strategists shouting potential countermeasures, scientists scrambling to analyze the enemy's approach vectors, leaders arguing over emergency protocols. But beneath it all, a growing dread settled in. Humanity had built the strongest fleet in its history. They had weapons capable of leveling planets, AI-driven battle strategies, fortress worlds, orbital defenses, entire fleets positioned at every major colony. None of it mattered. Because the enemy had already erased Triton, and if they could do it once, they could do it again. Then another transmission cut through the noise. This time, it came through proper channels, but it wasn't human. You burned us once. You buried the truth in the ashes. But fire is fleeting, and the dark always returns. The image on the screen shifted, and the room fell deathly silent. A planet. No, a graveyard. A barren world, its surface scorched, its oceans turned to blackened glass. Ruins stretched across the wastelands, the shattered bones of a civilization long dead. Not just any civilization. It was Earth. Not as it was now, but as it had been before. The realization hit like a sledgehammer. This wasn't the first time humanity had reached the stars, and this wasn't the first time the blackened sun had come for them. The image lingered on the screen, a dead Earth, a world burned beyond recognition. The ruins were unfamiliar, the architecture alien yet unmistakably human, a civilization lost to time. This isn't possible, someone whispered. Varian barely heard them. His heart pounded as he studied the image, thread twisting in his gut. This wasn't a fabrication. This wasn't a threat. This was proof. Humanity had reached the stars before, and it had fallen. The blackened sun's transmission pulsed again. The fire was never yours to wield. You stole it. And now, it will be returned. The fleet beyond Pluto advanced, their movements slow, methodical, like a predator savoring the inevitable kill. Dorna snapped out of the trance first. We need immediate defensive action. Mobilize all fleets. Activate system-wide emergency protocols. If they want a fight, we give them one. With what? Varian cut in sharply. We don't even know how our ancestors fought them. We don't know what worked, what didn't. We're stumbling blind into a war that's already been fought and lost. Kadar stepped forward, his hands shaking. There may be a way to find out. All eyes turned to him. There were rumors, fragments of data too deeply classified for even high-ranking historians to access. But if they're true, then there's a hidden archive, a place where the last embers of the previous war were sealed away. He exhaled slowly. A place only spoken of in whispers. Varian narrowed his eyes. Where? Kadar hesitated. Not where. What? The room tensed. They called it the Pyre of Dawn. A deep silence fell. The name carried weight, even though none of them knew why. The Pyre of Dawn was said to be the final weapon of our ancestors. A ship, a fortress, perhaps something more. The records are unclear, but one thing is certain. It was our last stand. And whatever it was, it's still out there. Varian's mind raced. If something like that truly existed, if it had survived all this time, it could hold the key to fighting back. Dorna didn't hesitate. Where do we find it? Kadar's face darkened. It was hidden where no one would ever find it, lost in deep space, beyond mapped territory. And for good reason. The air in the room seemed to grow colder. What reason? Varian asked. Kadar's voice was barely above a whisper. Because they feared that if humanity ever found it again, it would mean the blackened sun had returned. The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Varian straightened. Then we don't have a choice. We find the Pyre of Dawn. Dorna nodded, and we pray it still burns. As the Black Fleet approached, humanity's last hope lay buried in the void, and time was running out. The Indomitable plunged into the abyss of deep space, racing beyond the borders of mapped territory. The fleet remained behind to defend Sol, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the blackened sun reached them. Humanity had days, maybe less, before the darkness consumed everything. Admiral Varian stood on the bridge, watching the star maps shift as they neared their destination. The coordinates Kadar had uncovered weren't just outside known space, they were outside time itself. The Pyre of Dawn wasn't hidden in some distant system. It was locked inside a rift, a fracture in reality left behind from the last war. "Sir," Patel called from the sensor station. "We're detecting something." Varian's grip tightened on the railing. "Visuals. Now." The main screen flickered, revealing a sight that sent a cold shiver through the crew. A ship. No, a behemoth. It floated in the void like a tomb, its hull blackened with scars older than any record. Towering spires jutted from its frame, their forms jagged and broken, as if frozen mid-explosion. The vessel dwarfed anything in humanity's modern fleet, its presence an overwhelming weight against the endless stars. The Pyre of Dawn. "Scans?" Varian asked. Patel hesitated. "Impossible to get a full reading." "The ship is..." "Wrong, sir. It's like the sensors can't decide whether it's there or not." Varian exhaled. Of course. A weapon made to fight something beyond human understanding wouldn't obey the laws of reality. "Prepare a boarding team," he ordered. The Indomitable deployed a team of specialists, their suits reinforced against unknown hazards. As they approached the Pyre of Dawn, its sheer size swallowed them in shadow. Then, as if sensing them, the ship awoke. Lights flickered across its hull, deep, burning red. Not a welcome. A warning. The boarding shuttle docked with a silent hiss. The airlock opened. The team stepped inside, and time broke. One moment, they were in a lifeless husk. The next, the ship breathed. Flickering holograms of battle-scarred soldiers lined the corridors, shouting orders in a language that should have been dead. The walls pulsed with ancient energy, screens displaying fragmented combat footage against an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere at once. The past was alive within these halls, trapped in an endless loop of a war that had never truly ended. Then came the voices. Whispers slithered through the air, distorted but unmistakably human. "Who walks in the ashes of the fallen?" The team turned sharply, weapons raised. Before them stood figures clad in armor that no longer existed, soldiers from the war that had been erased. Their eyes burned with the same deep red glow as the ship's lights. "You are too late," one of them said, his voice layered with 1,000 echoes. "The fire is dying." Varian's heart pounded as he activated the comms. "This is Admiral Varian of the Solar Defense Fleet. We are here to reclaim the Pyre of Dawn." The lead soldier tilted his head, as if testing the words. Then, in a voice that chilled Varian to his core, he replied, "Then you will burn with us." The words echoed through the Pyre of Dawn's ancient corridors, layered with the weight of millennia. "Then you will burn with us." Varian kept his stance firm, his team tense at his side. These weren't ghosts, not entirely. The figures before them were real, bound to this ship by something beyond time, beyond death itself. "We don't have time for riddles," Varian said, forcing authority into his voice. "The blackened sun is back. Sol is days away from being consumed. If this ship is our only chance, we need to know how to use it." The armored soldiers exchanged unreadable glances. Then their leader stepped forward, the red glow of his eyes intensifying. "Do you think you are the first?" Varian felt something in his chest tighten. "What do you mean?" The soldier gestured, and suddenly, the ship remembered. The walls flickered. The past surged into the present, and they saw them. Hundreds, thousands of human fleets, not just from one lost civilization, but from many. Empires that had risen and fallen, each thinking themselves the first, each fighting the same enemy. The Pyre of Dawn had witnessed them all. The boarding team stared in horror as they saw Earth over and over again, destroyed, reborn, and destroyed once more. The soldier spoke again, voice thick with something unreadable. "You are but the latest embers of a fire that refuses to die." Varian clenched his fists. "Then tell me how we stop this cycle." The soldier studied him for a long moment. Then, with a motion of his hand, the ship responded. The central chamber of the Pyre of Dawn opened, revealing a massive core, a sun encased within metal, its fire barely flickering. Kedar gasped. This isn't a ship." He looked at Varian. "It's a weapon." the last fire humanity ever wielded against the blackened sun. One of the ancient warriors stepped toward the core, placing his hand against the glass-like barrier that contained the dying inferno. The fire of the pyre was forged to burn the void itself, he said, but it is not an infinite flame. It requires a spark. Varian understood immediately. A sacrifice. The soldier nodded. Not just a sacrifice. A commander. A mind that can wield the fire, shape it, direct it. One strong enough to burn away the dark without being consumed by it. Varian's stomach sank. You mean a pilot? We were the last. The soldier gestured to his men. But we are ghosts, echoes. We cannot command the fire anymore. His glowing eyes fixed on Varian. But you can. The air in the room felt heavier. Varian looked at the core, the dying star at the heart of the last great weapon against the blackened sun. He knew what they were asking. If he took the pyre of dawn back to Sol, he would not be leaving it. One of his officers spoke up, voice strained. Sir, there has to be another way. There isn't, Varian said quietly. The fire demanded a cost, and he was willing to pay it. Varian stood before the core, the dying star at the heart of the pyre of dawn. The ancient warriors watched him in silence, their glowing eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. Respect, sorrow, expectation. You understand what must be done, the lead soldier said. Varian exhaled slowly. I do. The pyre of dawn was not a ship to be piloted. It was a weapon to be wielded. And wielding it required a mind strong enough to contain the fire, to become the fire. Sir, you don't have to do this. Patel's voice crackled through the comms. She stood at the docking hatch, watching through the link. We can find another way. There is no other way, Varian said, turning to face his team. Every time humanity has fought this war, we've burned. We've lost everything. And yet, we keep coming back. We refuse to stay dead. His hands curled into fists. This time, we finish it. Kadar swallowed hard. The fire will consume you. Varian gave him a wry smile. Then let's hope I burn brighter than they expect. The ancient warriors nodded, satisfied. Then take your place, Admiral Varian. The chamber shifted. The core split open, revealing a throne-like structure within. A command seat surrounded by glowing conduits, feeding directly into the ship's fiery heart. Varian stepped forward. The moment he sat, the restraints closed around him, not to trap him, but to bind him to the ship. The moment the connection engaged, he felt it. The pyre remembered. His mind stretched beyond flesh, beyond time. He saw the past wars, the fallen Earths, the endless cycle. He saw the countless men and women who had tried to do what he was about to attempt, who had failed. The pyre whispered to him. One last ember. Varian gritted his teeth. Not an ember. A wildfire. Bring us home, he commanded. The pyre of dawn roared to life. Its ancient engines, dead for millennia, ignited, burning with the same white-hot fury that had once defied the abyss. Space itself trembled as the ship surged forward, tearing back toward Sol at impossible speed. The Indomitable barely had time to disengage before the pyre jumped, vanishing into a corridor of burning light. Behind them, the ancient warriors stood motionless, watching their last commander go. And then, one by one, they faded, their duty finally complete. At the edge of Sol, the blackened sun's fleet arrived. The defenders of humanity, battered, outnumbered, but unbroken, stood ready. Planetary defenses fired. Dreadnoughts unleashed everything they had, but it was like throwing sparks into the void. The black ships absorbed every strike, consuming reality itself as they advanced toward Earth. Then, for the first time in eons, the blackened sun hesitated. A second sun had appeared in the sky, a star that should not be. The pyre of dawn had returned, and it was burning. The pyre of dawn descended upon the battlefield like a second sun, its arrival shattering the silent inevitability of the blackened sun's advance. Space burned around it, reality itself bending under the sheer force of its presence. On Earth, on Luna, across the entire Sol system, billions looked to the sky and saw something they had never seen before, a human warship that burned like a god's fury. Inside the pyre, Varian felt the fire become him. He was no longer just a man, no longer just a soldier. He was the last commander of the first war, and the first commander of the last. The blackened sun moved, its void-born ships shifting, recognizing the threat. They pulsed with dark energy, preparing to erase him just as they had erased Triton. Varian's vision flickered. He saw the past, 1,000 wars lost, 1,000 Earths burned, 1,000 versions of himself, failing. Not this time. With a thought, he unleashed the pyre. The fire consumed the void itself, lashing out like a wrathful storm. The nearest black ships didn't explode. They unraveled, their very existence burned away in an instant. The blackened sun screamed, not in sound, but in thought, in presence. It felt pain. It felt fear. Humanity had burned before. But this time, the fire would not fade. The enemy retaliated. Reality itself twisted as it hurled its will at him, trying to unmake him, to erase him from existence. The pyre's system screamed warnings, the heat of its dying star threatening to consume him completely. Varian gritted his teeth. Not yet. He pushed the pyre forward, deeper into the enemy fleet. He became the fire. The black ships tried to flee, but the pyre burned faster. Every burst of fire from its core scorched the darkness away, igniting the void itself. But the blackened sun was not a fleet. It was not a being. It was a hunger, a force, a wound in the universe that refused to heal. And it was still alive. The black sphere at the heart of the enemy contracted. Then, with terrifying speed, it expanded, reaching for him, trying to consume the pyre just as it had consumed Triton. Varian knew what he had to do. The pyre of dawn was the last fire, the last spark of the war that had never truly ended. If it was to burn out, it would do so